Okay, this is a place where the New York Times says lightning strikes almost 300 days a year. So we're going to continue trying to put together this theory of meltology linked to the flood, linked to instant petrification and mudflood as a kind of unified theory. Let's just see where it takes us. I just want to refer back to an article in the the Express, that just kind of puts forward the ancient Egyptians using electricity theory, the Baghdad battery, mentions the Netflix documentary, The Pyramid Code. Definitely recommend watching that. But what it doesn't really look into is whether the actual pyramids themselves were devices or how that would work. So in the previous video we asked, is there a way to harness electricity from lightning? We're just kind of looking into this idea of the grid melting down, possibly because of trying to harness electricity and then a storm possibly upsetting the system and possibly melting it down, causing some kind of feedback loop. So this is an article by the School of Engineering, MIT, Sarah Jensen. So Sarah Jensen says that, Sarah Jensen refers to an MIT professor called James Kirtley, who says that absorbing lightning and converting it to useful energy would be a challenge. It would require complex capture and storage facilities and distribution systems that in the end would be, and then he says it would be unlikely to blah blah blah. So in terms of capture and storage, we need equipment for that. We need so storage, we're saying possibly in the red bricks, and then possibly the red bricks were all the stone walls connecting the UK together across fields, their houses. We can see that red bricks could also be used for heating houses. So it says that to start with, attracting a lightning bolt would take a much more sophisticated equipment than an iron key at the end of a silk string. You would need tall metallic rods extending high above the ground. So basically, this would draw in the electric charge from the atmosphere and direct them into the facility. So this theory, the unified theory, would be that the churches, the tallest buildings, usually the churches or the castles or the cathedrals, they would have different ways of generating etheric energy, the differential between heights, and then lightning energy. Could they absorb this lightning and then put it into a usable form where it's stored in a capacitor? So it says here that you would never know if a lightning strike is going to carry a positive or negative charge, and therefore capacitors and rectifiers would be necessary to equalize the currents of incoming strikes. It also says that lightning strikes occur on the Earth approximately 44 times every second, but most of these strikes occur in the tropics and remote mountain regions. So I had a quick look at the tropics here, and I'm just not sure if you agree with me, but would you agree that a lot of the pyramids and a lot of the areas that seem to have been destroyed are around those tropics? I'm not sure if Turkey is far enough away or the United States is far enough away to fit into that particular, or was it this where the grid meltdown started and then spread? So the Sahara is pretty wiped out. Namibia and the Kalahari, this part of Africa, Zimbabwe, Great Zimbabwe, that seems to be evidence of some ancient civilization. Australia, is that another place where there's been meltology? I mean, meltology seems to be global. We're talking about a global grid, but it's just interesting that the pyramids are located quite heavily within tropical kind of areas. So then I just went off onto capacitors and rectifiers. And we looked previously at bricks being used as capacitors and possibly glass. I quite like this part of Wikipedia here, them on capacitors, that mentions that European experimenters discovered that electric charge could be stored in water-filled glass jars. Water-filled glass jars can store electricity. Leyden jars were their name. So a Leyden jar looks like this, and it can store electricity. And it was actually the initial name for a battery. Apparently, if you connected lots of Leyden jars together, they called it a battery. So there's a fascinating article here which mentions ancient Greeks knew that amber could attract lightweight particles, triboelectric effect, static electricity, and then experiments with a guy called von Kleist, who was a deacon at the cathedral in Kamin in Pomerania and the Baltic Sea, in between Germany and Poland. So that's interesting, isn't it? That we're talking about cathedrals being part of this system, and maybe this guy is reinventing it or trying to get the system restarted again. So there was a mention of mercury up here earlier in terms of these capacitors. I'm pretty sure there's a mercury one. I need to find mercury on this page quickly because I want to look at mercury rectifiers. Possibly it's not that page. Maybe it's in the rectifier page. I need to go forward to rectifier. Here we go. So so we're talking about rectifiers and capacitors needed. We've said that the red bricks can be capacitors. We say glass can be capacitors, Leyden jars, or maybe water contained in giant jars. Not sure how that would work. But rectifiers, we've got stacks of copper and mercury arc valves. Valves being mentioned as ways of rectifying this current. So yes, mercury arc valves. I've seen truthers look into these things before, and we've talked about the mercury. Martin Liedtke's done lots of work about mercury-filled balls as part of the Antiquitech on top of buildings. So these might be a way of rectifying the lightning bolts, possibly. Possibly, or it's a technology that points towards being able to rectify. Mentions grid control here. We need to look into that a little bit more. I also mentioned noticed this Fashage looking thing for creating hydrogen. Just thought that was quite interesting. Okay, so then copper. Where do we find this copper? I just wanted to go on. So there's copper buildings as used as a building material. Copper sheets. So if we're going to get a rectifier made of copper, let's have a little look at what a rectifier made of copper would look like. So this is another mercury arc rectifier that powers the Jury Hill elevator. So this looks like a pretty serious piece of kit for old tech, doesn't it? We've got a mercury rectifier in there. We've got lots of rectifiers here. But the one I'm looking for is the rectifier using copper strips. I think I set it up further down here. So I'd already lined up lots of buildings that used copper. But here we go. This metal rectifier here. This is kind of what a rectifier looks like. So I was thinking, is there examples of copper being mined? So here we go. A metal rectifier is an early type of semiconductor rectifier in which the semiconductor is copper oxide or selenium. So I just wanted to look up copper seams in mines just to see if there was anything that looked like a rectifier. So that was an interesting little dig. So what do we find in copper mines? I noticed that lots of these copper mines just look like they're mining from melted buildings if we use the meltology frame to look through. So are we looking at potentially sometimes copper rectifiers, in series that would then be mined by, once the meltdown had happened, then future generations would have known that was there or would have rediscovered it and then found, this copper. If this is the kind of copper that we're taking out of mines, well, maybe that's the copper we found in the mines. And this picture here, this is just a mine, but it looks to me like a melted building, and they're just steadily trying to find out where the bits of copper are in this building. I mean, again, looking at these mines with new eyes, it very much looks like they're just digging out old buildings in some cases. Not all cases, obviously, but in some cases. Yeah, there's another picture of this mine. Just, it's just interesting to try and see if it fits into the meltology frame. And then here we go. Just, are these the remnants of copper rectifiers? And was it a way of harvesting electricity? So going back to the red bricks that we talked about earlier on, I'm going to link this up to petrification at the end. I'm going to get to petrification and follow on from the hydrochloric acid, which is one of the ingredients needed for a rapid petrification. But I quite like this, that hematite can be added to red bricks. We looked at that in a recent video. So hematite gets added to red bricks, which would help it be a capacitor and store energy and potentially heat up. I'm not sure it's needed for heat to be able to allow the bricks to heat houses. I guess there would be different variations. So hematite also is the Greek word that means blood. Because we have this very interesting rumour that some of the red bricks were bound with blood, or that the mortar was bound with blood. I read a quote from the Bible in a previous video, I think yesterday, where it said, "You shall work bricks, and mortar you shall be." Something like that. And I was thinking, there's an interesting phrasing. I would need to go back and look at the quote and then just grab it up again. I don't have it right in front of me right now, but hematite was literally the Greek word that means blood. And they talk about a bloodstone can be good for healing. So that's just a really interesting kind of crossover there. Okay, so go back to the petrification. So we've got here a petrified door in Pompeii. So Pompeii, that would be one of the conditions where you could have rapid petrifications of wood with the volcanic action and then there's other petrified objects that we can, for instance, find at Mother Shipton's cave, which I know a lot of the researchers, the truthers, have mentioned this petrifying well. I think it's in Yorkshire in England. Wikipedia says that it's a different process from petrification, it says, because it's petrified layers on top of an object that already exists. So they make sure that they specify that when they're talking about this. But the well is called a petrifying well, or a dropping well, and it's rich in sulfate and carbonate. So these are two other ways where we could have had petrification after the melting event, is that just potentially the floods came up. Everything's hot, so everything's bubbling, the seas are boiling until the massive oceans or the amount of water that comes in can finally cool. So we're going to be talking about an enormous amount of steam rising. That's going to cause more rainfall. Maybe we're getting this melting and rapid cooling effect that we see on a lot of the meltology. But one of the other ingredients, when we looked at this live science study, wasn't just hydrogen peroxide; it was the silica solution. So silica solution is also needed. So again, I just asked myself, well, where would the silica have been in this meltdown? Where are the silica? So I was thinking, well, what is silica used for, or silicates used for? Well, it says here, it reacts under acidic conditions to form a hard, glassy gel. This property makes it useful as a bonding agent in cemented products, such as concrete and abrasive wheels. It is an excellent adhesive for glass or porcelain. So I got this video, which I'm not asserting any copyright for. You can find it at this website, Art Molds. So it looks like this silica sealant's used in concrete, in the rebar. So this is a shout out of Wise Up. Wise Up, this is where your petrification's coming from, mate. That's your rebar, which is your theory. And then this is where the silica part comes from. We've already talked about where the hydrochloric acid could have been used and was used and would have been used. So you've already got materials here that can be used for rapid petrification, as well as a dropping well, sulfate and carbonate. So that's another way of it happening. So I'm just going to make this video full screen quickly. You can see the uses of it. We see these things all over ancient Egypt, all over the world. Uses of this silicate stuff to create these kinds of finishes. We're seeing that all the time. Sorry about the advertising nature of this. But we're just seeing a lot of uses for the silicate. Pipe insulation, fire protection, temperature insulation. So that ingredient is also there for the petrification. So I just wanted to point that out. I didn't want to make a meal of it, but just trying to follow it down the rabbit hole and to see where that goes. So anyway, guys, that's just a quick video that just tries to link together the meltology, petrification, use of the grid, free energy, the antiquitech, and I didn't get onto any Bible stuff or any Vedas stuff today, but I do want to keep referring back to the ancient myths and texts. But yeah, hopefully you agree that there's some interesting views about the past. It's interesting how the theories can intersect. I guess I'm looking for ways that the theories intersect. And I'm pretty sure, well, I mean, this looks like a fachades to me. But I'm still trying to figure out how the fachades were used and whether they were a form of ignition, perhaps, or directing a laser beam or something to ignite. Because that's another thing I've been looking at recently, is these hyperbaric bombs. Just have a quick look at that. So you've got hyperbaric oxygen therapy, but you've also got hyperbaric oxygen bombs, I believe. Oh no, thermobaric, sorry about that. Interesting little rabbit hole there. Hyperbaric. So vacuum bombs. Ignites a fireball that sucks in all the oxygen. So they've got sophisticated looking weapons there, but actually it's just drop in aerosol or fuel and then igniting it. So it's just distributing aerosol made of fine material to carbon-based fuel to tiny metal particles, and a second charge ignites the cloud, creating a fireball, a huge shockwaves, and a vacuum as it sucks out the surrounding oxygen. The blast wave can last significantly longer than a conventional explosive and is capable of vaporizing human bodies. That might be why we didn't see human beings in all those photos, not sure. Maybe that can explain why some of the cities look like they've just been literally nuked, not sure. You could drop them, but I guess presumably from high air balloons or hot air balloons or hydrogen balloons, and then drop the incendiary device. They don't look like they need massive sophisticated technology to make them. I could be wrong. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the little cascade through the unified theory. See how it's building up. Just do a little bit on it each day. And peace.